I said, Vachi, I want to make sure you understand. He said, what's that? I said, I got a D- in physics. And he burst out laughing. He said, you're my kind of guy, Morley.
Yeah, he's very interesting. I actually met him through, I did a talk at an Iowa farm and biologicals conference, and he does a lot of his water systems for farms.
I know. That's what he was telling me. He showed me the farm systems. Like it stands like 5 feet tall. It's a huge
Yeah,
system.
they're crazy, but the difference that it makes in the yields on the crops. So, and like basically what he's explaining is, you know, how water on a pond, when you throw a pebble in, carries a wave.
Right.
If the water molecules are incoherent, it doesn't carry the wave as far. And what's happening to just general planetary water is it's no longer as coherent as it used to be. And so his systems restore coherence. This is also interesting because this physical chemist, physicist, Barry Ninham, that I've been talking to in Australia, I had never heard the term ortho and para water. Have you heard? Yeah, I've just recently heard that. And, you know, it's basically the spin of the water molecule is either going clockwise or counterclockwise, which, you know, in a lot of systems, when you look at that, clockwise is building structure and counterclockwise is tearing structure apart.
What the bleep do we know, right?
Yeah, exactly. So all very interesting. Okay, so I think we've given people enough time to pop in, and I turned on the recording. So with that, we'll get started for this evening for tonight's Sugar Ship Challenge call. We are so fortunate to have with us Morley Robbins. I can't say enough about Morley. We met, gosh, actually through a fellow person with Parkinson's who, you know, sent me a message and he said, oh, you got to meet this Morley guy. And I think that was about 4 years ago. And
that's about right. Yeah.
We have kicked off a mutual education process of Morley teaching me the importance of minerals, and me actually taking Morley's root cause protocol training, and then me teaching Morley about the microbes and the importance of everything that they're doing to basically form that life bridge to make the minerals bioavailable. And so we probably talk to each other on average 5 or 6 days a week, if not in person, via text. And so, you know, I'm just very happy to have Morley with us tonight to share some of a tiny fraction of his knowledge with the group here, and just have a conversation about kind of what's going on and how we can get healthier.
Well, delighted to be here, honored to be here. And in the same way that I was very quick to tell Vachi about my academic prowess. If you saw my college transcript, you'd wonder how I can spell iron, much less talk about it. But for some reason, the universe had a plan for me, and I had a late in life epiphany and suddenly woke up. And one of the manifestations of waking up was to meet Martha and have a chance to connect. I'm a hospital guy by background. I had designs of being a doctor. It didn't take very long to realize that wasn't going to happen. But if you don't go to medical school, you go to business school. And you go to become a hospital executive. And that's what I did. Did that for 12 years and was a consultant for 20, and pulled a suitcase behind my back for 20 years, developed frozen shoulder, couldn't take my hand up above my waist. And that got me to my now wife, who is a chiropractor, who introduced me to natural healing. And she used a phrase, the innate healer, which is what chiropractors are all about. And I looked at her, didn't say anything, and thought to myself, if there's an innate healer, why do we have millions of doctors around the world? And so that's really what I set out to do, is to understand what that was all about. And I've written a book along the way. It's called Cure Your Fatigue. And you need to know I have a sense of humor, so I put a box around the CU so people could see the symbol for copper, and that's the innate healing. Bioavailable copper is what runs our show. And I am to the mitochondria what Martha is to the microbiome. And we have a very healthy détente where we have come to agree that we can't exist without microbes nor minerals. We just leave it at that. Because it's like we're both right. I think in our more challenged moments, we kind of can devolve into Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, but we try not to do that. But I have been humbled by Martha's research ability, and what I think is especially impressive. And she can back me up on this. I'm not afraid to just write somebody off because they don't understand something. It's just like, a pox upon you. But Martha, she has no judgment. I've never met anyone who has less judgment in them than Martha Carlin. It's like, so it's very inspiring to see. It's like, I can really feel that way. That's amazing. But she asked me to share some points of view and some perspectives, and I'm happy to do that, about the world of minerals. And what I was explaining to Vachi, because when I realized what his background was, I was a little bit intimidated. I know how to spell quantum physics, but I think we know the difference between Newtonian physics and quantum physics. We know how different they are. If you're not sure about that, go see the movie Oppenheimer, and within about 3 minutes you'll understand the difference. But I've actually seen that movie 5 times. It's a very captivating movie. But I think what turns Newtonian physics into quantum physics is the minerals and what they're able to do. Now, Martha would probably quickly say, no, it's those microbes. But the point is, we live on a planet that is richly endowed with a lot of different minerals. You can see there's a triangle behind me, and it's actually an Egyptian healing. It's a print honoring Egyptian healing. It's a really beautiful print. What you can't see is there's a whole series of ankhs lining that vanilla colored border, and that's of course the religious symbol in Egypt. It wasn't made of gold. The ankhs were made of copper. And the way I characterize it is there's about, depending upon the author, depending on the source, between 82 and 92 minerals. Well, there's a pecking order. And I can assure you, the very top of that diagram is the sun. And copper is unique in its ability to have attraction, magnetic attraction to 2 elements. It has a magnetic attraction to sunlight, and it has a magnetic attraction to ammonia. And why is that important? Because that's the beginning and end of life. Sunlight starts it, ammonia ends it. And copper's involved in many, many transactions. So I thought I would start with a very provocative statement. What I'm not certain about, Martha, is the folks on here obviously have a connection to sugar chefs. Do they have a connection to Parkinson's, or what's their? Do they have a clinical?
So it's a
background?
pretty broad audience. I mean, it's people who are taking the Sugar Shift Challenge or
Okay.
taking Sugar Shift for 6 months and sort of tracking their progress. We do have a lot of followers here from Dr. Davis's program.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people who are well versed in his low carb eating and looking at SIBO. We do have some Parkinson's people or people who are connected to people with Parkinson's. We have folks with diabetes or blood sugar issues. So it's a pretty broad
Good. That's great.
spectrum, and quite a few people here actually with science backgrounds. So
Excellent. Great. And I just want to reinforce that I've never met a question I didn't enjoy. So if you want to ask a question as I'm talking, don't hesitate. But I'll start with a provocative statement. And again, I kind of came into this experience some 15 years ago. This was not on my to-do list. I did not say, well, when I turn 56, I think what I really want to do is become a self-taught mineral expert and have a following around the world. And no, I kind of backed into this. And it was probably about 8 years ago, after I'd been studying minerals for 6 or 7 years. And I cut my teeth on magnesium. And I worked my way to iron, and then oxygen, and then copper. And I'll explain the order there in a minute, why that's important. But there's a couple of Facebook groups. There's a Magnesium Advocacy Group. There's a RCP page. And so what I created along the way is something called the Root Cause Protocol, RCP. And it's kind of basically what I did was I dusted off Mother Nature. I said, how does the body really work? And so I made a statement a number of years ago on Facebook. I just wanted to see what the reaction would be. And I was sort of stunned at the response. But the statement was, there is no such thing as medical disease. There is only stress-induced mineral dysregulation that causes metabolic dysfunction. And we've all been raised in a post-Pasteur enemy paradigm. You got to kill the bugs. And of course, Martha's very quick to protect those bugs, at least the good guys. But we think nothing of taking an antibiotic. I mean, I was raised with penicillin and amoxicillin and things like that because I had constant ear infections and sinus infections. And of course, I was just assumed that's what you did. My sister became a nurse. I didn't know that the conventional medical system was toxic to the core. I didn't know that. And so it turns out that in the Merck manual, and that's the Bible of allopathic medicine, there's 32,000 symptoms in the Merck manual. And they all have one thing in common: cellular energy deficiency. And if the cells can't do their job, they die. And the individual who inspired me around that, his name is Douglas Wallace. He's a biologist and geneticist at CHOP, Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. He's the guy that figured out that everyone descends from 7 women in Africa. Pretty smart guy. But his area of expertise is the mitochondrial DNA. And so I made that statement on Facebook. There is no medical disease, yada, yada. And I thought there'd be this tsunami of response. Nada, not one word. And that emboldened me that there is no disease. It's all about energy. And a real tough period for everyone was obviously 2020. And I think we're still reeling from that. But I renamed what COVID stood for a couple months into the experience. COV stands for coppers vanished, and ID stands for ions dysregulated. Now, the part you may not know is that copper is the general inside our body, and iron is the foot soldier. I put it in orders of magnitude. We're born with 70 milligrams of copper. We get that from our mom. And then we accumulate about 30 more milligrams. So we're supposed to, as adults, we're supposed to have 100 milligrams of copper. And to give you a sense of how little that is, 100 milligrams of copper fits on the head of a 1-inch stick pin. It's a really tiny amount of copper. And then we have about, on average, about 5,000 milligrams of iron in our body, at least we're supposed to. So that's a 50-to-1 ratio. That's a lot of iron, not much copper. And so to give you a sense of conceptually what this means, picture a watch battery and how small that is. And a watch battery can run the locomotive pulling 160 cars. That's kind of what we're talking about. That's how powerful copper is. And some of you may be scratching your head right now because everyone knows that we're anemic and we're copper toxic. And that's the mantra that runs medicine. You're anemic and you're copper toxic. They want us to believe, what's the 3-letter word in believe? Why? They want us to believe that we need more iron, tons more iron, and get rid of that pesky copper. And that narrative has been running for about a century. It started right after the First World War, and it hasn't let up. And what fascinated me the most was to learn about 2 major studies that were done here in the States in 1928, in March of 1928 at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where they denied rodents copper in their diet and iron accumulated in their liver. I mean, really significant accumulation of copper, accumulation of iron. Then in May of 1928, Dr. McHarg at the University of Kentucky did the same thing, withheld copper, and was shocked to see how dark the rodent's blood got. The darker the blood, the more iron it has. And so it became sort of this known dynamic. And then I found an article from 1927 from Berlin that was a study by Otto Warburg and Hans Krebs. There was a point where 1926 to 1930, Hans Krebs worked for Dr. Warburg. And what you have to understand is Warburg is the most celebrated, enigmatic, arrogant scientist to ever grace the planet. And he's only been nominated for a Nobel Prize 52 times. But he only got one because Hitler said that was enough. One was enough. But he was just a brilliant scientist and clinician. Krebs working for him, who then went on to get a Nobel Prize too. And they did a study in 1927 where they bled birds to deplete their body of blood. They wanted to create a true state of anemia in these animals. And they wanted to see what was the physiological response to having very little blood, very little iron. And what shocked them was to find out that in the group of birds that were pigeons, there was a threefold rise in copper enzymes in the blood. And in the geese, there was a sixfold rise of copper enzymes in the blood. Now, what did they do with that research? They put it in the Ark of the Covenant, put it in the warehouse of the Indiana Jones movie. And there are like 4 people on the planet who know about that study. But the important thing to understand is that low copper causes high iron in our body. It's one of the most critical axioms of biology that is not taught anywhere. It's not taught in college, it's not taught in any kind of doctor school, any kind of health training school. Why? Because it kills the narrative. You're anemic and you're copper toxic. And so the truth of the matter is everyone on the planet, including the people on this call, we are copper deserts and we're full of iron. And just to drive that point home, get out your calculator, or unless you can do this math in your head, maybe you can do it in your head. Take your age and multiply it times 365. That's how many milligrams of iron you have in your body. It's not my theory. It's the theory of the leading iron biologists on the planet. Robert Crichton, Douglas Kell, Gutteridge and Hallowell, these mythical iron scientists all agree on the fact that we accumulate 1 milligram of iron every day we're on the planet. Now, one of my students, I think he was in your class, Martha, Alfonso Manzo, just gave a talk today. He's a naturopath up in Ohio, very sharp guy. He thinks it's actually 3 times that. So I'm 71. I've got 26,000 milligrams of iron. And my body is designed for 5,000. And therein lies the crisis on the planet. And it was a real serious problem before COVID. Now it's hyperbolic. And everyone's heard of the spike protein. And there's a iron hormone called hepcidin. And this will be on the final at the end of our conversations. You got to pay attention to this. But hepcidin is a very powerful hormone, as most hormones are, and it disrupts iron metabolism. Well, the spike protein and hepcidin are almost identical, to the point where you're like, why would you put that into a jab? Because hepcidin is really designed to be in a body that has very low copper. So there's some serious manipulation of copper and iron in humanity. And what most people don't know is how important copper is. And I think in part that's why Martha wanted me to chat. But let me drive it home. There's a world-renowned copper expert named Leslie Clavet. It's a guy. He's got an MD and a PhD. And he's been studying copper his whole life. He just turned 90 2 weeks ago. I called him up to wish him a happy birthday. And he's just this mythical figure in the world of copper. And Leslie Clavet is the guy in 1973 who figured out that lack of copper caused cholesterol to rise in the body. What was Big Pharma doing in 1973?
Selling statins.
Selling statins, that's right. Now it's the #1 product on the planet. What the first $1 trillion product, statins. So you got to spell it right. $, TATIN, $. And Dr. Cleve, that was a very bold thing for someone to do in 1973. He said, well, it's actually a copper deficiency. And when we use the phrase copper deficiency, that has clinical significance. It's not, oh, copper's low. It's a very precise, oh my gosh, we got a serious problem here. And so for that finding to become science, one other lab needed to confirm his findings. Since 1973, over 30 labs have confirmed that Dr. Cleve was right. And it's mind-numbing because we live on a planet that thinks that cholesterol is a good thing. It was actually one of the first chemicals that appeared on the planet after oxygen appeared on the planet. That's a whole other story. But the thing is, Dr. Cleve in 2002 wrote a very important chapter in a very important book. And what he identified was 80 anatomical, chemical, and physiological defects in a copper deficient heart. 80 defects. One of those defects is called myocarditis. Ding, ding, ding. So anyone who suffers from myocarditis, like all the athletes around the world who are dropping dead like flies, has no copper in their heart. COVID. And the other really important figure is he was a MD PhD as well. He was a pathologist. His name was Jerry Sullivan. He was a pathologist at University of Florida in Gainesville. Brilliant, brilliant guy. And he figured out that it was iron accumulation that's killing us. He it's like I would love to swim in their brain for just a few seconds, just like, oh my, the insights. But he realized why women outlive men. It's really cool. There's actually two reasons why women outlive men. First reason, women are smarter. So the testal coil around a woman's brain is stronger than the testal coil around a guy's brain. There's more energy in a woman's brain. That's a biological fact. The second is women donate blood every month for 40 years. So they're dumping iron for 40 years. And that's why women outlive men, because they have less iron. The tragedy we face now is we live in a very iron toxic world where iron is fortified everywhere. And this all changed. Well, let me finish Dr. Sullivan. So Jerry Sullivan developed what's called the iron heart hypothesis. And he redefined cardiology, put it on its ear. And it's one of the most disruptive theories of why people die of heart disease is the accumulation of iron. Why are they accumulating iron in their heart? Because they ain't got no copper. Ding, ding, ding. Low copper, high iron. And it blows out the physiology. Iron is very, very disruptive. And what does iron love to do? Feed the pathogens. All the bacteria, fungus, virus, and parasites all feed off of iron. All of them. And so we've got this very dynamic interplay between these two metals. Copper's the general, iron's the foot soldier. But that's not well known. And the challenge is getting people to realize and understand what causes aging. It's actually not complicated. It's that number in your calculator. As that number gets bigger, you are going to age. It's going to show up inside your body. It's going to show up on the outside. you would have a hard time believing that there was a time when I had flaming red hair and a red beard. That's when I was younger. Now I'm a little bit older. As my oldest son Matt, who's now 39, likes to tell me, he said, "Dad, you're 16 years old with 60 years experience." I'm like, "Thanks, Matt." Um, but the thing is, what's very disruptive about this message is the complexity of it. It's like, wait a minute, it's too simple. And what you don't fully appreciate is the complexity of it as well. And I love that word from Yogi Berra. He's a great crafter of words and phrases, but complexity is really what it's at. And what really changed, some big milestones of change. After the First World War, they started adding a lot of sugar to food because they started refining the grains. And they realized that it kind of tasted like cardboard, so they had to sweeten it up to get people to eat it. Well, the other change they made after the First World War was they started adding NPK to the soil: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And that was based on research done by a German agronomist in the 1880s. He burned produce to see what was left. And, oh yeah, we need more sodium, or nitrogen, or phosphorus and potassium. What they forgot to tell the farmers is that when you put NPK down on the soil, it blocks copper uptake in the root system. So it started to change the ability to access copper. And as Martha is quick to point out, I think you've only said this 1,000 times, that we're not unlike plants. And so we need these minerals in our diet, but they were denying copper. And an amazing book, I'm going to charge extra for the audio visuals, Martha. For those who have not read this book, is it showing up correctly? Okay, Soil, Grass, Cancer by Andre Voisin. It's one of the most important books I've ever read. 1957. Voisin is an impeccable biochemist who loves to dairy. He loves to raise cows, to milk them. That's his hobby. And what he laments is that there's no copper in the soil, which wasn't getting into the grass, which wasn't getting into the cows, which wasn't getting into the milk, and his clients were developing cancer. And he takes you on a journey to explain all that. So copper's not getting into the soil. Well, then they really amped it up in 1941 in the US, the UK, and Canada. And they started adding iron filings to wheat flour. Not organic iron, iron filings. Take a steel rod and scrape iron filings into the wheat flour. That was in 1941. One of my favorite articles is a study done in 1951 at Tulane University, where they were measuring the cholesterol difference 1941 versus 1951. And the cardiologists are like, why is the cholesterol so high? Because they didn't know that copper was MIA because of all the iron, and that's driving the cholesterol out of the liver. It's actually a very comical article because they're completely unaware of what the problem is. And then of course we know what happened 4 years later. 1955, President Eisenhower is playing golf and he has a heart attack. And then we shut down cholesterol, baby. You've got to get rid of that cholesterol because we know that causes heart disease, right? We know that. Does everyone know that? We know that, right? We were held hostage for 65 years to that moronic message. And it was actually 2016 when Diamond et al. Said, stop it. Cholesterol has nothing to do with heart disease. And so we've been given a slight reprieve, but cholesterol or statins is still a steamrolling society. So 1941, we're adding iron filings, and another wonderful book to read in all your spare time is Iron, the Most Toxic Metal by Jim Moon, Jymmoon. Iron, the Most Toxic Metal. And what we're informed about is that there's 9 different forms of iron being added to the U.S. food system, 9 different forms of iron. And lo and behold, how many of them cause cancer? 9. And then what also happened in 1969, the FDA wanted to increase the amount of iron being added to the food system by 50%. Excuse me, by 300%. 300%, a threefold increase. And 20-some scientists from around the world flew to Washington, D.C. and said, what are you trying to do? Kill people? And in a magnanimous gesture, the FDA reduced it to a 50% increase. We don't know how much iron is being added to the feed. When I was born in 52 and I was able to eat foods, I loved spinach. And back in the 50s, spinach had copper in it. It's been hybridized, ladies and gentlemen. Spinach now has iron in it. And they've done this with a whole series of foods. So then what happened? We introduced something called high fructose corn syrup, which is poison on steroids. And it chelates copper out of the body, causes uric acid to go into orbit, and it's attached to all forms of metabolic syndrome.
It also concentrates glyphosate.
And it what? Concentrates?
Concentrates glyphosate in the.
What's wrong with that? That's
Yeah.
a win-win, right? And so that's in the early 80s. Then in 87, they decided to take this industrial pipe cleaner called glyphosate, and let's make it a harming chemical. And it's and I'm sure Martha has shared with you how toxic it is. The tragedy of it is how simple it is. It's glycine with a nitrogen wart. There's a very important copper protein that you've never heard of called ceruloplasmin. It has 16 conserved glycine. Well, if the glycine has a nitrogen on it, it's not going to work right. And that copper protein has 8 atoms of copper inside it. And it's the master antioxidant in our body. You may know of glutathione. That's the master antioxidant in the cell. You may know of melatonin. That's the master antioxidant in the mitochondria. But the master antioxidant in our body is called ceruloplasmin, and it's not taught to doctors. I wouldn't either if I was trying to sell drugs. So glyphosate enters the scene, and now it dominates farming. But a watershed study was done in 2017. And this was done of French citizens. 40 years previously, France opposed, and most of Europe, I think, opposed the use of glyphosate. Lucky them. And vehemently opposed to it, not allowed in farming. And a 2017 study was I just came across it recently, where they analyzed the urine of French citizens. And 99% of French citizens are peeing glyphosate in their urine. It's a serious problem. What does that mean? It means that glyphosate is everywhere on the planet, in the air, in the water. Hopefully it's not in Bocce's water. And it's a very powerful mineral chelator, but the chelation comes out, Liz, not now. The chelation comes out at at a logarithmic scale. So glyphosate will pull magnesium and calcium at a 3. It pulls out copper at an 11.9. So what does that mean? It means that glyphosate chelates copper 1,000,000,000 times faster than magnesium and calcium. It chelates zinc and iron at around, I think it's 8.7. So what does that mean? It means that it's chelating copper 1,000 times faster than zinc or iron. And what's really unsettling is there's 2 forms of iron. It pulls out ferrous iron at an 8.7, and it gives ferric iron a pass. And that's, if you knew what that meant, you'd be running down the streets where you live like your hair was on fire. It's a very scary thing. And so now we have this situation where glyphosate is everywhere. If you haven't seen the movie King Corn, please watch that documentary. It's amazingly educational, and it will really challenge you to change your diet and try to stay away from GMO food as much as you can. It's impossible, but do the best you can. And so these 2 minerals, where our health and well-being is held in the balance of those 2 minerals. And so what we've got are chemicals being added to the soil that chelate copper. We have chemicals being added to the food, like high fructose corn syrup, tyrosinase inhibitors. Tyrosinase is one of the most important enzymes on the planet. It's a copper enzyme. Tyrosinase inhibitors are designed to stop the spoilage, stop the browning of the food. But we're going for shelf life, not human life. And so we've got the ground copper chelators, we've got the food copper chelators, and then we have the body copper chelators called prescription medications. And so things like antibiotics, hormone replacement therapy, I mean, it's just, it goes on and on. The number of copper chelating drugs is a little frightening. Any drug that you might know of that has the letter F in it, fluoroquinolones, ciprofloxacin, things like that. Any medication, any anesthesia, ding, 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 any inpatient anesthesia, they started activating all anesthesia in 65 with fluoride to make it better, right? And what does fluoride do? It chelates copper and magnesium. So we live in a very challenging world. And if these critical minerals are missing, it's going to affect the microbiome, as Martha will very aptly and extensively point out. And so one of the most important aspects of copper is the need to make it bioavailable. It's one of the few minerals that needs to be, if you will, activated. And the mechanism to activate it is retinol, animal-based vitamin A, that was plentiful in our diet prior to Eisenhower's heart attack. And the country went on a low-fat diet in 55, and we haven't let up since. Because in the recesses of your brain, you know that a high-fat diet is going to cause heart disease. You've been trained like a circus bear to believe that. When in fact, retinol is one of the most important nutrients in the food that we eat. And where can you find it? Milk, butter, eggs, cheese, especially cottage cheese, beef liver. really, really important.
Everyone's favorite.
Everyone's favorite. And of course, cod liver oil, everyone's other favorite. And the reason why retinol is so important is that there's two copper pumps in our body. One's called ATP7A. The ATP means you got to have energy to make it work. ATP7A and ATP7B. 7B makes ceruloplasmin, which is that copper protein that's so important. 7A makes all the rest. The disadvantage you have is you're just learning about copper for the first time and you didn't know there were any other copper enzymes. Well, there are dozens of them, and they run the body. You can't make energy without copper. You can't clear exhaust without copper. You can't color anything without copper. You can't connect anything. All the connective tissue in our body has one enzyme that connects collagen with elastin, strength with flexibility. And you knit those together and you have tissue integrity. And so it goes on. But the thing is, retinol, which has been methodically drummed out of our diet. I'll give you $1 if you can find a full-fat yogurt. It doesn't
We
exist.
make them.
Yeah, that's right. Of course you do. But the thing is, the average person doesn't. And the average person doesn't know that retinol turns on those copper pumps so they can load copper into these enzymes that run and regulate our body. And when the enzymes get loaded up with copper, they know exactly what to do. And this is not taught in doctor school. They don't know that retinol is where it's at. And we all know we need more vitamin D, right? We know that. That's a fact. Can't live without vitamin D until you find out that vitamin D blocks the absorption of retinol. Ding, ding, ding. Now that's a problem. It's a binary uptake in the intestine. And trust me, everything you know about vitamin D is a bold-faced lie. And it's all based on correlational research, not causational research. What's the difference between correlation and causation? Do flies cause garbage? Do firemen cause fires? No, but they always show up. Flies show up with garbage, firemen when there's a fire. And vitamin D is low. Why? Because you have inflammation. Or as my clients in Louisiana call it, hey doc, I got some of that inflammation. And inflammation is just a very poor form of converting oxygen into water. And let me just leave you with one thought, and then I can open it up if you have questions or whatever. The most important chemical transaction, Martha might see it differently, but I think it's the most important chemical transactions. We live on a planet with 21% oxygen in the air. Oxygen is not our friend. It is a poison. The most reactive element on planet Earth is called fluorine gas. That's why they're adding it to so many drugs. Ding, ding, ding. The most reactive element on the planet is fluorine. Second most reactive element is oxygen, O2. Third most reactive element is O3, ozone. Ozone is not your friend, folks. It's complicated. And so we are endowed with enzymes inside our mitochondria. We have 40 quadrillion mitochondria. That's 15 zeros. So think of the biology textbook you had in high school. There's a picture of the cell, and there were 2 or 3 mitochondria. Well, that picture was drawn by Walt Disney. The average cell has 500 mitochondria. Average liver cell, 2,000. Kidney cell, 4,000. Heart cell, 10,000. Mature egg in a woman's body, 600,000 mitochondria. neurons in the substantia nigra, a brain region that you all might know about, mostly black, substantia nigra. 2 million mitochondria. And each mitochondria needs to have 50,000 atoms of copper. It's a good thing to know. It's not my idea. Paul Cobain, world-renowned copper researcher at Auburn University, figured that out in 2004. Is that taught anywhere? No, except in the course that Martha took. And so the most important reaction is in the mitochondria. And it turns out that the mitochondria is the terminal destination for oxygen and iron. Iron is the number one element on planet Earth. 36% of the Earth's composition is iron. Number one element. Oxygen, second most reactive element. It's the master. It's a really powerful oxidant. But they meet in the mitochondria at a complex that turns oxygen into water, 2 molecules of water. And when that happens, when oxygen becomes water, it releases energy. Most important transaction on the planet. And that's why the name of the book is Cure, C-U-R-E, Cure Your Fatigue. You need more copper to convert more oxygen into energy. And the beauty of energy is that it keeps the pathogens at bay. Because you're all familiar with a pH scale, 1 to 14. 1 is really acidic, 14 is really alkaline. It's actually a bell-shaped curve. And 7 is at the center, and the peak of the curve is optimal production of energy. And it occurs at a pH of 7. And the pH inside the mitochondria needs to be 7 in order to have this burst of energy. If you go to the left and start working your scale down to single digits, like 5 or 4 or 3, it's becoming more acidic. The energy is dropping off. If you go the other way, make it more alkaline, energy is dropping off. Guess when the pathogens wake up? When the energy is below the peak. So the pathogens are all energy vampires. And they've known that for 170 years. So they decided to put the spotlight on the pathogens. Let's kill the pathogens with pasteurizing milk, antibiotics, and let's ignore making energy. And we are endowed with a very sophisticated physiology, a very sophisticated blueprint on how to make energy, how to maintain energy, and keep our body in homeostasis. And what the farming, food processing, and pharmaceutical systems have done is conspired to weaken humanity because there's no money in healthy humans. So it's a very, very different world than I certainly thought it was 15 years ago. I had no idea that it was this dark and this dank. But there's hope. We've got Sugar Shift. We've got Recuperate. We've got a lot of recommendations on what to do. But what you have to do is avoid mainstream medicine and mainstream alternative medicine because they don't talk about minerals. My younger son, Tom, got a PhD in biochemistry from Stanford, so he can run circles around me with what he knows. He's the one who taught me about enzymes and how important they are. And there's a very famous biologist at Harvard named David Sinclair. Is it David Sinclair or Andrew Sinclair? David Sinclair. I think David Sinclair. And he just wrote a book called Outlive. And it's like this thing. Outlive. He said, Dad, you got to get that book. It's amazing. So I got the book. I can't believe I fell for it. I got the book. First thing I do is go to the index, see how many references there are to copper, how many references there are to iron, how many references are there to, ferroxidase enzyme or cytochrome C oxidase enzyme. 0. And so then we've got people like David Sinclair, Andrew Huberman, Dr. Attia, I can't think of his first name.
Peter.
Excuse me? Peter Attia. These blowhards love to talk about longevity, but never tell you that it's minerals in charge. And minerals in dysregulation that's causing the energy loss. So
And microbes.
And microbes, of course. And so the point that I bring is that there is this foundation of minerals that runs all life on the planet. We can't live without the microbes. They are and I think what Martha would say is that many of these enzymes that we think are human enzymes are in fact microbial enzymes. Thank God. I think that's a really powerful concept. But those enzymes, for the most part, need to make energy. And they can't make energy if they can't convert oxygen into water. And so just to drive the point home, and then I'll stop talking. Have you ever stopped to think about what an antibiotic is? Antibiotic, anti-life, right? What's it really doing? Well, Sir Alexander Fleming, went on vacation and left some petri dishes behind. And what happened? Mold grew on those petri dishes. And voila, he comes back and he sees mold and sees that there isn't, certain things aren't growing where the mold is. The birth of penicillin. What people don't know is that penicillin gets metabolized in the body and it becomes penicillamine. Next to glyphosate, it's one of the most powerful copper chelators on planet Earth. So penicillamine, of which I took a few hundred rounds, just sucks copper out of the bacteria. And what you need to know, Martha, I don't have my book nearby. What you need to know is that what mitochondria are called a purple bacteria. And what we've been trained to believe is that the antibiotic goes after those bad bugs, those nasty little bacteria, and it stops, and we're not going to touch the purple bacteria. And that's the dirty little lie. And so now we're dealing with the 4th generation of antibiotics. And Cipro is used for like UTIs. And so that would be like using a cannon to try to kill a gnat. And it destroys the microbiome, as you well know. But what it's doing is it's destroying copper chemistry. And one of Dr. Liz's clients from Chicago was a world-renowned cyclist. Used to hang out with a guy named Lance Armstrong. Got a UTI, was given Cipro, blew out his Achilles heel, and had to leave the tour, never to return to cycling. And he never understood what happened, and I was able to explain it to him. And that only made it matter, of course. But the thing is, we live in a world of duality, and there's a lot more to the story than we realize. It's a lot simpler than you think it is. We've been trained to believe that it's really complicated to get well. It's not. Just have to do the right things. And so I'm delighted to have had a chance to share these insights with you. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And we'll just see where the discussion goes from here at this point.
Okay, it looks like Paula. That's the only hand that's up currently, but I'm sure we'll have some others. So you'll have to unmute yourself, Paula. Nope, you're still muted.
Hello?
There you go.
Gave me so many choices to unmute myself. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was fantastic. And I was actually expecting more talk about magnesium. And my questions are about magnesium,
Sure.
but I'm so excited to learn about copper. But you never told us. Let me start with the copper very quick. So do you believe we need to supplement the copper, or it's enough to eat the food that contains copper? But you say there is not much copper in the food anymore, so it's kind of complicated. So let's start with this, and then I'll move to magnesium.
Sure. It's actually very simple. There's very little copper in the food system now. And even regenerative farmers I don't think they realize how serious the glyphosate issue is. Maybe some do. I don't want to sell them short. What's your product, Martha, to regenerate the soil?
The paleo power. Yeah.
Paleo power. If a regenerative farmer doesn't know about paleo power, then move on. They don't get the problem. But when I realized what COVID was about, it just happened that I published my book in 2020, and then the next year, 2021, I developed a copper supplement called Recuperate. That's an indication of my unending wit. Recuperate. So it's a supplement you take. It's got desiccated beef liver. It's got spirulina, has turmeric, and then 2 milligrams of copper bisglycinate.
I see.
Now, let
There's
me,
a picture of it.
Yeah.
well, thanks, Martha. Yeah. Start with 1. Move your way. And take it with a meal. It's better with a meal. Get up to 2. You might need 3. A lot of my clients are taking 6 or more Recuperate. They're feeling pretty spunky. Now, let me anticipate your question about magnesium and explain what the relationship is between copper, iron, and magnesium.
Okay. And can we test before start supplementing? Is it worth testing?
You can if you want. A lot of people do. You don't have to. I know right now you're a copper desert. I'm not being arrogant. Do you live here in the States?
Yeah.
What color's your hair?
Red.
Don't ask.
If it was originally red, you're a copper desert.
No, I'm not.
Okay. I'm pretty confident that everyone here doesn't have enough copper. But the relationship is, if copper's down, iron is high.
Iron is up. Yeah.
Iron likes to play with oxygen, creates oxidative stress. It's the greatest stressor on planet Earth, oxidative stress. And what does oxidative stress do? It causes magnesium loss in our body. Magnesium and B vitamins are the first to respond to stress. So magnesium goes right into the toilet. And so I coined the phrase magnesium burn rate. But it took me years to figure out what was causing the magnesium burn. And it was because of high iron, because of low copper.
Okay.
So you can take a bucket of magnesium and solve your symptoms. You will never correct a copper problem by taking magnesium. You've got to take copper to solve the iron overload problem.
I'm going to show you my bucket of magnesium.
I can't wait.
So first, let's start with magnesium hydroxide. So this is what we were using before to make magnesium water. That was recommended by Dr. Davis.
Right.
And it's a little bit of pain in the neck, but it's claimed that it's well absorbed. So this is one type of magnesium.
Yes.
Okay. Another powder is magnesium citrate that I sprinkle on my food from time to time.
No, give that to the neighbor you like the least. It's a very bad
Then I have my magnesium caps. So what is this? So
tequila.
this guy is oxide, citrate, and aspartate.
Okay, you want to just throw that away.
You don't like this either.
Well,
Okay.
it's not that I don't. No, it's not that I don't like it. It's not doing you any good.
Gotcha. Let me finish with all of them and then you'll comment.
Okay.
This is magnesium, potassium, again, aspartate.
Yep.
So,
aspartate, right.
yeah, aspartate. Like, yeah, it says what it is. And finally, high absorption magnesium, which is, what is it? Glycinate.
Okay.
So those are all magnesiums that I play with, and I'm not sure what to do.
Okay.
So if you can comment, I will appreciate.
First thing to do. When was the last time you donated blood?
I do not. I never did.
What's your age?
I'm, what am I? 64 almost.
64. I can't do the math in my head. So you've got 23,000 milligrams of iron in your body. You're designed.
Even when you go and they draw blood, this doesn't count?
It's
Not
a very
enough.
small amount. Very small
Not
amount. So you've got 5 times more iron in your body than you're designed for. That iron is causing rust inside your tissue. It's causing the magnesium burn rate. And you're focusing on the magnesium. I get that. It's a very important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
You've got to lower the footprint of iron in your body. You've got to raise the footprint of copper in your body. And I think what you need to do is streamline your magnesium. The richest magnesium water on the planet is in Poland. And you can go to any Polish market and get very rich magnesium water. It's a lot easier than trying to make your own.
Actually, it's in Bulgaria that I'm born from. But yeah, unfortunately, they don't bottle it.
No, but they do in Poland. It's
Yeah.
a very good form. And the two best absorbed forms of magnesium are magnesium glycinate and magnesium malate. The formula is 5 times your body weight in milligrams. So if you weigh 100 pounds, you take 500 milligrams of magnesium. And so it's a very simple form. Very simple form.
So do you mean they should be combined together?
No.
That would be the best or not?
You can mix and match them. I tend to prefer malate. That's my go-to. Some people really like glycine. The other forms that you can use, you got the magnesium in the water. You can do transdermal magnesium chloride oil. It's not really oil, but it's kind of filmy. Or you can use Epsom salts to take baths with the magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
The skin absorbs the magnesium. It's a very powerful absorption process. You can just do the bottoms of your feet. You can just massage the bottom of your feet with magnesium chloride oil. And the pores in the soles of your feet are very, they're designed to absorb these nutrients. So that would be another option. But I think you've got to lower your iron footprint. You need to introduce copper into your body to manage the iron that's there, and then you've got to streamline your magnesium intake. You've got forms of magnesium that don't work well, they don't get absorbed, and it's just adding a lot of stress to your tummy during the course of the day.
I understand completely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Absolutely.
One of the things Stephanie Seneff said about doing the Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, is that helps with those sulfated cholesterol molecules that you need, because glyphosate is disrupting all the sulfate metabolism also.
Yep.
So, and one thing I'll just kind of report from John, when John is having difficulty, if he gets in a tub with Epsom salt, in
Um,
short order, 10, 15, 20 minutes, he's like a new person. So there's definitely something to the Epsom salts. But what I would say is, just like everything else now, instead of you go to the drugstore and there's one bag of Epsom salts and you take it home now, you go in there and there's 20 different bags, and they've added all these artificial scents and stuff.
Sure.
Do not get the ones that smell like lavender or smell like whatever, because it's all fake, and you don't want those fake molecules. You just want plain old Epsom salts.
That's right. Keep it simple.
We had Rodney Dueck's got a question.
Yes, it's a similar question to Toby's.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about copper
Mhm.
supplementation. You mentioned recuperate. Is that the name of it? Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that's you find that generally just copper is not necessarily an absorbable thing.
Well,
Routinely.
It's a great question. Here's the challenge, Bobby. Our ancestors in the 1930s were getting between 4 and 6 milligrams of copper in their daily diet. Their organ meats, the nuts and seeds, the foods that they were eating. They were very mineral rich. 30 years later, the number dropped to 2 to 5 milligrams. Now in the modern era, the RDA for copper is 0.9 milligrams. Our physiology is not designed for a whisper of copper, because there's a lot of oxygen out there. There's a lot of iron in our environment and in our body. And we've been iron fortified our entire lives. The breakfast cereals that we were raised on, if you saw what I ate for breakfast as a kid, I'm sure we're all guilty of it. Frosted Flakes, Pop-Tarts, orange juice. I mean, it's insane what we ate. And there's no copper fortification in the food system. Think about this. They do not fortify magnesium, copper, and retinol, but they fortify iron, calcium, and vitamin D. These are diametrically opposed elements. You never focus on yin at the expense of yang, or yang at the expense of yin. And so we are in an era now where it's not in the food system, and there's open game with glyphosate. If French people are peeing glyphosate in their urine, it's pulling copper out of their tissue.
Yes. And I was supplementing copper several years ago, and started reading here and there about risks of too much, and I was wondering, where's that coming from?
Demonic minds.
Okay.
No, seriously, it came from a guy named Carl Pfeiffer. There is a guy, just like there's a Louis Pasteur, just like there's a Anthony Fauci. Well, Carl Pfeiffer got a PhD before he got his MD. That's a clue. It's a really important clue. And he became a psychiatrist. And he was a principal in the MK Ultra program that was run by the CIA. As soon as you find out he was involved in MK Ultra, you need to take his theories and just throw them in the garbage. But he's the guy who wrote an article in the 60s. So let me back up. I've studied the literature pretty carefully from 1900 all the way up to the present day, but especially for copper, 1900 to 1960. And guess how many references there were to zinc in that 60-year time period? Like that many. Because the land grab was around between copper and iron. They knew those two minerals were essential for making energy. Turns out iron is the waiter copper is the chef. There's a difference between a chef and a waiter, right? And so brains of the outfit, brains of the body, brains of the mitochondria is copper. Zinc is just a distraction, unfortunately. And Carl Pfeiffer's the guy. He wrote an article in the 60s, and he coined the phrase copper unbound from ceruloplasmin, which then morphed into unbound copper, which then morphed into copper toxicity. And if I were Satan and I were selling drugs, I'd want you to believe that you can harm yourself taking too much copper. The key is you want to take bioavailable forms of it. You got to have retinol. You got to have like a copper bisglycinate like we use in Recuperate. It's very bioavailable. Don't start drowning yourself with copper sulfate or things like that.
Yeah.
It's just not advisable. That makes sense?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The other thing I would, I don't know if you can, I actually, Dawn Huber gave me this book.
Hey, I had to pay for that, damn it.
So it's actually kind of difficult to get. They won't sell it on the Amazon, but it's synthetic pesticide use in Africa.
It's only a problem in Africa, Martha.
I mean, they did this for a conference in Africa, so that's why the title. But there's actually a chapter in here by a veterinarian friend of mine named Arthur Dunham. And Art Dunham, because he deals with animals that are suffering from the minerals toxicity of glyphosate,
Sure.
really understands the mineral dynamic better than anyone I have ever met. And he has a chapter in this book, if you're interested and you can get it, synthetic pesticide use in Africa. And I've told people over and over again, if I were ever sick and I needed a physician, I would actually go see Art Dunham. Because I think his knowledge of how to deal with the health issues in animals that he's seen over the last 20 years and the difference he's making in the herds of the farmers who will listen to him is pretty phenomenal. And he understands those mineral dynamics and, especially copper. So
let me drive that point home because I think it's a really important point. And I'm with you. If I got sick, I'd go to a vet before I'd go to a doctor. You all have heard of Crohn's disease. It's a very debilitating issue in the colon, or in the intestine at least. Turns out that animals get a similar condition. It's identical to Crohn's. Johne's disease, called Johne's disease. There is only one cure for Johne's disease that is taught to veterinarians. Is to put copper in the feed. And then the Johne's disease disappears. And
there's another cure.
Probably sugar chef, right?
No, it's a microbe, though.
Of course. It must have copper in it. But the point is...
No, but it chelates iron.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so copper's gift to humanity and to all life forms is that it regulates iron, it recycles iron, it keeps iron in circulation. That's what it's all about. And it's one of the primal forces on this planet is to keep iron in circulation in living tissue. The obsession in medicine today is to put iron in storage. Nothing good comes from storing iron. It festers. It creates oxidative stress. That's the origin of all the problems, is excess iron accumulating. And the thing is, there's a whole parallel series of terminology that vets use compared to what doctors use. And the vets go right to the minerals to solve the problem. And it's really tragic that that's not taught to.
And that's really the large animal vets. The small animal vets I think they probably suffer from the same problems that regular medicines, but the large animal veterinarians understand the mineral dynamics. So the other thing I would say is, like, I do think that glyphosate and some of what they've done to the food supply has resulted in people having, like we've talked about, either Minky's or Wilson's aspects of inability to deal with copper properly, because either the ceruloplasmin is, bound up by glyphosate, or, the copper's not being delivered to it, which kind of mimics Wilson's because you don't have enough ceruloplasmin. So, there are some dynamics to what's gone on for so long in the food supply that could cause dysregulation of copper.
Absolutely. So I think the big takeaways are copper is the general, and iron is the foot soldier. And the way I consider iron is it's a 4-year-old with a hammer. It needs to be constantly regulated, and it's completely misunderstood from a conventional allopathic point of view. And
Okay.
that's the source of all the problems right there.
We had, I think Marcia might have fallen off. She was there in the queue. So if Marcia comes back, she'll be next. But we have Jennifer, Jennifer Baines.
Okay.
Unmute. Okay. Hi, and thank you so much. This has been so amazing, and I'm trying to reduce my questions down to just 1 or 2. I have so many. Okay. Number 1, I have played around with GHKCU copper peptides. Is that the same? Is that helpful?
It's a naturally occurring peptide. It was discovered by Lauren Pickert back in the 70s. He just passed away a few months ago. Great legend that just passed away. It's being used increasingly. I'm not convinced it's the most bioavailable form. You may have heard of the LifeWave patches, X39, X49.
Yep.
Okay. So what that's doing is those patches are really cool, right? And what they're doing is they're making things work that aren't working. What happens when you stop wearing the patches? It's not correcting the underlying physiology. And so it's halfway technology. It's a crutch. And it works. People feel better. And what's happened in the world is we've been trained to treat symptoms, not correct the physiology. The physiology is what's missing. The microbiome is off, the mitochondria are off, the mineral composition is off. And so that GHK copper, I don't think it's as robust as it needs to be in order to restore the copper metabolism.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That makes sense. You said zinc is a distraction. We don't necessarily need a zinc I think I got excited about zinc during COVID just as another way to, stay healthier.
That's exactly what they wanted you to do. They had the COVID cocktail was ascorbic acid, vitamin D, and zinc.
Yeah.
That's the perfect triad to kill the bioavailability of copper in the body. And so zinc blocks copper uptake. Zinc kills the enzyme that turns oxygen into water. Zinc kills the enzyme that makes iron usable in the body. I have a hard time with zinc. It's in our food system, and as a nutrient in foods, especially meat, it's fine. Put it in a bottle, and it's a poison.
You mentioned some other names out in the health realm that aren't talking about minerals, and I try to follow everybody, as many people as I can, I'm a nutrition coach. But Chris Masterjohn talks a lot about minerals. what's your opinion? Is he someone you'd listen to, or what's your thought?
They
Um,
have lively debates.
Oh, good. Okay.
there's 5 people on the planet who refuse to talk to me. Jack Cruz is one. Chris Masterjohn is another. No, the thing is, Chris is a good guy. He knows what he knows. He's a PhD trained UConn nutritionist. He has hemochromatosis. Did you know that?
No,
Yeah, he's got hemochromatosis, which means he has an iron loading disorder, and he doesn't do phlebotomies, and he doesn't believe in copper. And so I saw him a couple of years ago at Weston A. Price meeting, and I said, Chris, we really need to do a recorded conversation. And I could see the look of anguish in his face, because I'm a hack. I don't have formal training. I'm just a smart guy, read a lot, like Martha, and I can connect the dots. And that really annoys people who've gone through the formal process. But he said, well, I said, what's the problem? He said, well, I don't agree with you. I said, great. That's the whole basis of the conversation is where don't we agree? I'm sure we agree on something. And that was two years ago. So I've had 3 different people try to bridge that conversation. And the last overture, the person came back to me and said, well, Morley, apparently not everyone believes your circular argument about copper. And I went, okay, so at least I know where I stand. So I think Chris talks a lot about cholesterol. That was the daily lipid, right? That was his blog for years. Did he ever talk about copper? No. So he's too allopathic for me. And he's a very, very smart guy. I think he needs to learn. What he needs is a tutorial with Martha and Morley. And I think then he'd be a really rocking nutritionist.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I think there's a big question on all of our minds about what to cook with. Do we need to throw out our cast iron pan? No.
Cast iron's been used for 1,000 years, right?
Okay.
Make sure it's seasoned right. Just don't cook foods. Don't cook acidic foods in the cast iron, and don't ever clean it with soap.
Yep.
That's it.
So I actually, I don't know if this is an epiphany or not, but you know how sometimes your cast iron can get rusty?
Yeah.
Well, so I put my cast iron skillet on the stove with its rust.
Yeah.
And I put some butter in there. Well, the butter dissolves the rust.
Yeah.
It like disappears.
Right.
So it made me wonder about, fats and rust in the body and what might actually be going on there.
Retinol is a very powerful regulator of iron.
So maybe it undoes the rust.
Right. It mobilizes it. There's amazing research that's been done with retinol and iron.
So butter your iron skillet.
Yeah, no. And what does a good chef use? What did Julia Childs insist on? Butter. What's the can't think of the publisher of her cookbooks. They've now expunged all references to butter and replaced it with margarine.
Oh.
Random House has completely
Changed Julia Child.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Terrible.
It is terrible. And she was, she's just preeminent authority.
I was snacking on butter.
I was doing a consult with a client in Canada, and we were actually talking about her son. And she came downstairs, and he was in the kitchen eating a stick of butter. He's 15 years old. He was eating a stick of butter like it was a carrot. And she says to me, "Apparently, I'm not giving him enough butter." Said,
My niece actually used to, when she was about 4 years old, used to hide in the closet, and they would find her eating butter. And I said, "That's her
It's a
body
good
telling her that she needs butyrate or those fats. Okay, now I do see that Marcia is back, so let's let Marcia ask her question, and then we'll go back to the rest of the queue. But you have to unmute yourself, Marcia Donaldson.
Okay, I was trying to do it on the other screen.
Okay.
Well, I had a copper IUD for almost 30 years.
Mhm.
And, I don't know. I've heard about, the copper one and the copper two or whatever, the bad copper and the good copper.
No,
And what should I do?
copper 1 is intracellular. Copper 2 is extracellular. When the bulk of copper in our blood is hanging out in ceruloplasmin.
Or should be.
Should be, yes. 98% of the copper should be in ceruloplasmin. Some studies say it's as low as 70%. I think that's an extreme. But the thing is, what you want to do, if you're worried about the copper 1, copper 2, and again, this is you're keying off of the research or the work of Charles Barker, who was completely wrong about copper, the proper copper. And unfortunately, Charlie died 3 years ago. Nobody knows why he died, but he died. You should take a copper supplement, but what you also need is a whole food vitamin C. And there's a difference between vitamin C and ascorbic acid.
Oh, yes, I know about whole food vitamin C, and I don't take anything like ascorbic acid. No.
So whole food vitamin C will put the copper, the extracellular copper, put it back to work. Get it back
Okay.
into the cell.
Now,
There is something, I don't know about the IUD, but I think I sent something to Morley about this a month or so ago, where they have shown in women who are on birth control that their plasma is green.
Mhm.
And that's an indication of oxidized copper, isn't it, Morley?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
In the plasma, but I don't, I mean, I have that sort of on my list of things to look at, is how those birth control are disrupting copper, but I don't know about the IUD.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed on the IUD, but and it's a vexing issue in society. But they knew in 1963 that birth control pills were blowing up copper ceruloplasmin in women's bodies.
yeah, I didn't do the pill. I just did the copper IUD. But
Right.
the other question is magnesium.
Yeah.
By the way, I just took today, I used some magnesium malate and used I make my own magnesium oil because I
Okay.
was having muscle spasms in my neck and shoulders. But when I have had I'm a lab scientist by profession.
Mhm.
So I've done the magnesium, the serum magnesium, and the red blood cell magnesium.
Yeah.
And most people are deficient. Mine are always normal. They say everybody's deficient, but
What are the numbers? Because I've never met someone who's normal. No offense.
no. Oh gosh, don't ask me that. I wish I had my reports in front of
Okay.
me.
Wait, let's back up. Do you want to know why you have pains in your neck and shoulders?
Because I was working on my 2 years of income tax last week for till 2 o'clock in the morning every night, probably.
So that's a very stressful thing to do, right? So stress releases cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol needs to be turned back into cortisone. Cortisol is the active, cortisone is the storage. The enzyme to turn active back into storage requires magnesium.
Okay.
So why is the stress here in the shoulders and the neck? Well, you've heard of fight or flight. You're either going to fight the bear or you're going to run from the bear. And over generations, we, just because of experiences of our ancestors, we are going to feel the stress in our shoulders and neck first because of the cortisol that's rushing there to try to mobilize energy so you can fight the bear.
See, I already know I have I have an abnormal, I've been tested like 3 or 4 different ways, and my autonomic nervous system is disrupted terribly because I had vagus nerve cut and all kinds of different things. So, yeah,
And the vagus nerve loves copper,
okay.
loves magnesium, but loves copper.
Well, I'm gonna order some of your your copper for sure.
Yeah, and we also make a cream and a liquid. It's a serum, copper serum.
Okay.
Guys like the serum, women love the cream. So just some other options for topical application as well.
And you were talking about the COVID in the zinc and everything, but before that, I had gotten I know this sounds crazy, but it was a copper thing that you would put up in your nose and rub around your nostrils to keep from getting sick.
The zapper, right?
The zapper.
No, that's what it's called. It was designed by Hulda Clark, who was a
I know.
nurse who became a PhD. I think she became a PhD nutritionist. if I
I've
recall.
got her books.
Yeah, the Hulda Clark is a genius.
She
But
was.
it's a very specially designed piece of metal that goes into the upper recesses of the nose, and on contact, copper kills pathogens. Now, for any of you, if any of you are using silver as an antibiotic, please stop that now, because silver kills copper metabolism. Copper is the original antimicrobe. Absolutely. It kills the bad guys and it vitalizes the good guys. It's its job on the planet. It goes back to the beginning of time. So please do not use silver. Continue to use your zapper, but you can. What's missing in our body is one mineral that is the source of energy. It's the source of vitality. It's the source of frequency, the vibration that our bodies are supposed to produce. That energetic frequency is what keeps the pathogens at bay. And when we're missing copper, they take over. And it's been a multi-generational process since the First World War.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help.
Thank you. Okay, Mary Ramos.
Good evening. Okay, so that was a great presentation. Thank you. And my question is on the mineral supplements. This all we need is to take is this copper, and we're gonna be good.
It's not quite that simple. I wish it were. What I developed, if you track down my book, Cure Your Fatigue, the front half is what's the problem, the back half is what's the solution. Solution is the RCP. If you don't want to spend the money, go to rcp123.org, go to resources, and download. You'll need to donate your email address. We'll protect that and honor that. But we're going to give you in return the RCP handbook. It's 82 pages long. It's a very colorful document, a lot of instructions. What it boils down to is a series of stops and starts. It's about a dozen stops, a dozen starts. And it's a pretty simple approach. Again, we dusted off Mother Nature. Minerals is at the cornerstone of the whole program, especially magnesium and copper. Vitamins are very, very important, as you know, but not synthetic vitamins.
Oh, that's my question. I've been trying to find the vitamin B's because I have neuropathy, and I have
It's copper deficiency.
Yeah, copper deficiency.
It is a copper.
It's really bad, and it's getting worse. And the doctor put me on hormones replacements, and with that, it's like awful.
Yeah,
Made it worse.
the hormone replacement blows up your copper and makes it ineffective. Again, back to Dr. Clave, when I first met him, like it was 12 years ago, he said, Morley, this is the very first conversation we ever had. He said, Morley, if you ever have any clients that have neuropathy, he said, that is a clinical sign of copper deficiency. Do you understand what I just said? I said, yes, sir, I do. And so
Oh, wow.
that's not taught in doctor school.
No. The
And-
only thing they've told me to do is take that alpha folate acid.
No, the chelates copper.
That does too?
Absolutely does.
Oh, maybe that's why I'm getting worse.
So if you have neuropathy, I think just for grins and giggles, you should review the RCP. What's missing in the RCP, Martha? What's missing in the RCP?
The microbes.
Sugar shift. That's right.
Sugar shift.
No, so we're going to be adding that. And so you know about sugar shift. Start focusing on your minerals. B vitamins, unfortunately, you get those from organ meat, like liver. Is
Bee
I
really
love-
pollen.
I eat liver.
Bee pollen. Liver and bee pollen are very rich sources.
What did you say? Beet powder?
Bee pollen.
Bee pollen.
Bee pollen. Oh,
Bee pollen.
interesting.
Get it? Bees, B vitamins, right?
Okay.
And the color of bee pollen tells you it's got copper in it.
Okay.
And what another conversation I had with Dr. Clave, he's a great guy. I said, Dr. Clave, I have this theory that all the B vitamins have copper in them and that they have a job to regulate iron. He's a very gracious guy. He said, well, Morley, I can't speak for all the B vitamins. He said, but what I can tell you for a fact is that folate, B9, is copper dependent. Well, learning that was a paradigm shift for me because it opened up a completely different understanding about vitamin A and vitamin D.
So for someone like me who has a neuropathy and issues, I have lots of other issues. I have other autoimmune problems. How much of that restore would you recommend? Your vitamin, the copper rather. Yeah, no, recuperate.
I would start with a couple and see how you feel.
Okay.
You might need 3 or 4. You might need more than that. I have one client who's a type 1 diabetic living on insulin. His insulin ran out. So he took 15 recuperate. He didn't need his insulin.
Wow. No, I'm not diabetic. I don't know why I have neuropathy. Other than I have rheumatoid arthritis and I have Hashimoto's.
Okay,
And
your spleen is tuckered out.
My spleen is tuckered out, huh?
That's the gateway to all autoimmune disease. So there's a company called Standard Process.
Oh yeah, I know that.
They have a product called Spleen PMG, which stands for protomorphogen.
PMG.
Basically,
Okay.
it's like stem cells. Think of it as stem cells. And so you need to take the Spleen PMG as directed on the bottle.
It doesn't give you directions on the bottle.
It
But
should,
it-
doesn't it? Doesn't it
No,
just-
but Brian Artis said 3 in the morning and 3 in the evening on an empty stomach.
Okay.
Ah.
I'm not going to argue with Brian Artis. He's the guy who taught me about the importance of the spleen. So your spleen, the spleen, we've all been taught that the adrenals take all the stress. Oh, I have adrenal fatigue.
I do.
Okay, that's a party line.
Oh, okay.
The organ that takes the stress is called the spleen.
Okay.
Spleen.
It also controls your immune responses.
Right.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So what if you can't take this on an empty stomach? I'm already taking my thyroid on an empty stomach. I have no empty stomach during the day because I'm taking all this stuff.
I don't know that you have to take it on an empty stomach. The beauty of
Okay.
the standard process products is they are food-based concentrates. They're not.
Okay.
Take them with a meal is fine. You know.
Okay.
Oh, this one actually does say It says 1 tablet 3 times per day on an empty stomach.
Doesn't sound right to stomach. That's fascinating.
Yeah, but Brian said 3 in the morning and 3 in the evening on it.
I don't know. I
So-
don't know why that would be a requirement.
Okay.
But
Well, probably because you're signaling the cells, you know,
Yeah.
and if they're going in with a lot of food, maybe there's some confusion around that. So I don't, you know.
maybe so. But your spleen is blown out. I guarantee it. And your neuropathy is absolutely a copper issue. You need B vitamins, they're very important, but you're going to solve the neuropathy with copper because it's going to mobilize the iron that's fritzing out your nerves. That's
Okay.
that's what the source of the neuropathy is.
Okay. And your website was the
RCP
RCP
123.org.
123.org. Okay. Okay. Thank you,
And
sir.
Jennifer, we have open enrollment for our RCP Institute. If you want to learn how the body really works, you might enjoy that program. It'll be a lot of fun. Because you didn't learn about minerals in nutrition school. Not the way you were supposed to.
Okay, now we have Norma Jean, and Missy will be next.
Be Missy?
The Missy with the kitty there.
Missy with the kitty. All right. And then I'm going to turn into a pumpkin. I got,
Yeah.
I've been going pretty
It's
hard.
getting late. I know. I
Yeah.
told Morley, I said, these are scheduled for an hour, but they always go longer than an hour. So these will be our last 2
That's fine. That's good.
questions, and then we'll let Morley go.
So what's the question?
Oh,
Where's Norma? Norma Jean.
Norma Jean, what happened? Oh, we had to let her back in. She accidentally hung up. Are you back, Norma Jean?
There she is. Okay.
Norma Jean?
This better be a good question.
Okay, well, let's go to Missy while Norma Jean tries to get her
Uh-huh.
connection back.
I'm back.
Oh.
Hi. Great presentation.
Thank
And
you.
like Jen, I have a bajillion questions. You talked about how much penicillin you took when you were younger. I
Yeah.
also I had rheumatic fever as a kid, so I took penicillin
Okay.
for 20 years every day. So I have not much of a microbiome left, not much diversity at all.
Mhm.
I've been doing the sugar shift for probably a year and a half,
Mhm.
but I actually had to stop taking it, or I'm doing an experiment, Martha. This is kind of for you too, where I was waking up every night from like between 2 and 4, and I'm assuming my cortisol went up and my blood sugar went low. So I actually, for the last month, I haven't taken any, but I'm going to start taking it again because I'm still having some nights where I'm waking up. So I don't know how to fix that other than trying to do more protein. I wanted to ask on the copper supplement,
Mhm. Yeah.
on the bottle, I think it says to take 1. And I think Mary just asked that question also. So how do you know how much to take? And is there a limit?
The NIH would tell you that 12 milligrams is the upper tolerable limit for copper.
Okay.
I know there are people that are exceeding that and having no issue. You have to understand I'm threading a needle around the world. So I'm very conservative. And I really tell people, start with 1, go to 2. What invariably happens is people start to get their energy back. It's
Okay.
it's not complicated. And one of my colleagues world-renowned scientist from Hopkins, diabetic for almost all of his adult life. And he finds that 6 recuperate is his sweet spot. He feels in control of his diet, his metabolism. The criticism of copper as a supplement usually are twofold. One, nausea and racing mind. Let's talk about why that happens. What's copper's job on the planet? Well, one of the most important jobs is to mobilize iron. Where do you think iron's hanging out? In our stomach and in our brain. And what does copper do? It mobilizes iron in the stomach, makes you feel sick. If you've ever been pregnant, that nausea that you were experiencing from the prenatal ding, ding, ding was the excess iron coming into your copper deficient body. And your body couldn't handle it. The racing mind is taking the spotlight and moving it away from iron that's causing the racing mind and shifting it and saying, that darn copper's causing the problem. So those are the 2 dominant symptoms that people would feel. And I think what you really need to do is literally feel your way into this and see what feels right. And see what's the sweet spot between your energy and your symptoms. And I think you're going to find there's a point where they crisscross.
And so should you split that up to like do one in the morning or one at night, or does it affect?
I would. Yeah, I would. No, it's not going to affect. If anything, see, it actually calms the body down. Because when the body can make energy, it calms down. But definitely take the supplement with food, because you're going to digest it then. It already has food in it. It comes with desiccated liver. It comes with the spirulina. But I think it's advisable to do it with food. And again, go slow and start low and work your way up. Invariably,
I take mine with I take it with Sugar Shift because I know that the
that makes sense.
plantair, some of the microbes in there have multi-copper oxidases that help deliver the copper. So I take them at the same time.
What I was going to say real quickly is the biggest mistake that people make is they try to get well yesterday. And it doesn't work. You've got to go slow. It took you years or decades to get out of balance. You got to give yourself time to get back into balance. It's not going to take years. It's going to take months.
I've been trying to get well for 10 years. Okay. I'm trying to think if I had any other question. I also have MTHFR. So
you have a copper deficiency. The
That's
methionine synthase enzyme is copper dependent. That's the heavy methylation.
Good to know.
B9, B12, they're copper.
Okay. I also take care of my dad, and he used to take, he had a brain bleed at one point, and
Brain bleed?
So they put him, he fell and ended up with a blood clot. So they put him on Coumadin, and when they put him on Coumadin, they put him on 365 milligrams of ferrous sulfate twice a day. And I argued with the doctors for years, and finally they took him off of that because I started him taking desiccated liver pills.
What's his age?
He's 89.
Okay. Well, God bless him.
And he takes Sugar Shift and Ideal Immunity. So I think I'm going to start him on some copper.
Has he ever donated blood?
I don't think so. Like they think he bleeds, like if he's not careful, like he has to watch it, because he used to have, I don't know if he ever had Crohn's disease or just irritable bowel or whatever. And this was my argument with the doctor. I said, well, you have him on so much iron. I don't know how anything can survive in his microbiome. Like, that's just a ridiculous amount of iron. And, he's got neuropathy. He's got all kinds of other things. So
If I had a magic wand, what I would love to do is have you do what's called the full Monty iron panel.
okay.
And I'd be happy to interpret the results. He's got the reason why he has this blood dysregulation is lack of copper in the excess iron. So your instincts are spot on, but it would be helpful to know what the balance is of his key minerals, and that's what that mineral test does. Martha has a link for it, or if she doesn't, I'll make sure she has it. But I think given your stress level, given his age, you probably would benefit by knowing what's going on with your old dad before you start to really pump him full of the copper. I think he would benefit from it. I'm not worried about you giving it to him. I think you'd like to know what the parameters are of his body so that you can put that into context.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. But yes, okay. So I'm going to get everybody some copper, at least if I get him a little bit, and then I'll see if, when usually I attend his doctor visits virtually, and he has a nurse practitioner, and she's been pretty good about, if I say, can we have this test or can we have that test? She's been pretty good at that.
When you meet with the doctor, don't use my name. Use Martha's name. I've got enough people chasing after me.
I don't do anything like that. I just kind of say, no, I want this. No, I want that. Probably think I'm in the neck.
Right. I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
And your dad has
That's
all
okay.
Your dad has all his faculties?
Yeah. No, he's kind of forgetful on some things, but I've been taking care of him for probably 10 years. But he lives on his own, so.
Here's a quick case study. One of my students, her grandfather was a former college professor. He was 86 years old, and he was living in a nursing home. He loved to tell jokes. That was just his nature. He started to forget the punchlines, and then he fell down. And she thought, well, we've got nothing to lose. She talked with the director of the nursing home, and they made arrangements for her grandfather, Chester, to start the RCP. He didn't know what he was taking. And 11 weeks into the experience, the director of the nursing home called her up and said, what's in these supplements? And she said, what? She said, well, Chester is telling jokes again and remembering the punchlines. So it didn't take very long for the natural vitamins and minerals and nutrients to work their magic. So I think the same would be true for you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah.
Martha, just a quick question for Martha. So, like I said, Martha, I think I'm hypoglycemic, and that's why I'm waking up in the middle of the night. And do you have any other suggestions? Like I said, it seemed like
well, this is interesting because I was actually on a podcast a few weeks ago with called Critical Conversations for Women's Health, I think. It's two sisters, but one of them is a nutritionist, and they actually deal with a lot of Parkinson's patients. So we mostly were talking about Parkinson's. We were talking about John maybe being hypoglycemic and waking up in the middle of the night as a result of that. And one of the things she actually suggested about taking a pinch of salt before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
I've that the orange juice I've heard
oh yeah, because we talked about that before. So I don't
How much
Yeah,
fat is in your
that
body?
was interesting to me, but what happens is if you're, and this also makes me think because you've taken the antibiotics for so long, so you probably have trouble turning the glycogen
Mhm.
into glucose. So when your glucose starts to drop at night, what will happen is you will convert glycogen while you're sleeping into the glucose so you don't have to wake up. But if that process isn't working well, probably because you've had so much antibiotics, and that's the same thing with John, lots of antibiotics in his youth, then you may not be able to do that conversion. And so you are getting a dip in your glucose. I don't, do you have a CGM? Did we talk about that? I can't.
I don't have a CGM. I bought the Keto Mojo, but I've never opened it because I'm such a sissy and I don't want to poke my finger. So I need to probably do that because, like I
Well,
said,
I mean, I would definitely look at that in the middle of the night. And then, if you are taking sugar shift, you might, I might like either not take it in the evening, just take it in, or
but I was taking 2 in the morning instead of taking 1 in the morning and 1 at night. And I mean, I'm sure it works. It does a lot of the things it's supposed to do. But like I said, for me, I still feel like I'm insulin resistant. I haven't lost a pound of belly fat. I've been doing
right.
Dr. Davis's. I've been doing that for 10 years, and I've been doing the sugar shift for a year and a half. And I haven't lost a pound, or I haven't lost belly fat, which is what I'm
Right.
Mhm.
So
and that also would be kind of an indication that you're not able to convert that glycogen and burn that fat.
So is there anything you
into
can do?
glucose. Well, I mean, have you tried strict carnivore?
No, I mean, no.
That's the one thing. I just came back from a conference that, like, I can't tell you how many people I met who had turned things around from, doing 30, 60 days of strict carnivore. I mean, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but I mean, if you think about it, it's not that hard to cook strict carnivore. It's just hard to kind of force yourself to only eat that. But
Yeah. Well, I also follow Benazati, and I've listened to him a bunch, and
well, he hasn't dropped the podcast yet, but he did a 90-day strict carnivore, and he did a lot of blood work before and after, microbiome tests before and after, and he's got some really interesting results to share, but he hasn't dropped that podcast yet.
Oh, I think he did.
Oh, did he? Is it just, it's just out in the last couple of weeks then, I think, maybe.
So he said he expected to find a less diverse microbiome, and he actually found a more diverse.
Right.
Yeah. Which, because mine is, I have a lot of proteobacteria and like some weird things that aren't supposed to be there. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I don't know. You might try that if you think you could sustain it for 30 days.
Well, how much harder is it than doing wheat belly?
I mean, it can't be. I mean, it can't. I've done it for a couple of weeks. It's the hardest part about it is if you live with, like, I live with John. He's not doing strict carnivore. Is if you're having to cook something for somebody else who's not doing the same thing you are, is kind of a pain in the ass, really. But
I would suspect, Norma, you have a lot of iron in your tissue that you're not aware of.
Could be.
No,
I mean,
could be. I'm confident with your symptoms. That's what the problem is.
And I was always very anemic. Like,
of course,
when I would go to the doctor, they would say, "You're anemic. We should do a colonoscopy." I'd be like, "I'm not anemic. I don't need a colonoscopy." But I used to have when I had a period, I had a period like sometimes every 21 days. So and I would lose a lot of blood. So that's probably why I was anemic. But since I don't have periods,
All the clocks in the body require copper, and heavy menses means the body's trying to get rid of excess iron. It's the only way to get rid of excess iron.
and I also had clotting issues. Like I had a TIA and a retinal occlusion, and
You're an iron toxic.
So you
Yeah.
might look at donating blood.
Mhm.
Although
Okay.
it sounds like you don't like pricking, so you might
No,
not like that. But it's not bad. I do it.
I actually don't mind. I from having rheumatic fever, I had blood work I was stuck sometimes several times a day.
The reason why you have heavy iron is copper. Had you been born with sufficient copper, you would not have had rheumatic fever. You didn't get enough download from mom.
Okay. I would believe that.
Copper is downloaded the last trimester of the pregnancy. And it's a very, it's all mammals, not just humans.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who's born premature did not get a copper download. Anyone who has a severe condition like that did not get an adequate copper download. It's unfortunately, it's not rocket science.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your help. It's very informative, and I'm definitely going to try it.
It's great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we got Missy, and that's it. So
That's it.
All right. Morley, thank you so much for your presentation. I just want to let you know I was born with psoriasis.
Mhm.
I was born with it, and I took antibiotics for the first 20 years of my life, from a baby to around 22.
Wow.
So I've pretty much detonated my gut, and that's why I'm on sugar shift, SIBO yogurt, and a whole heap of other yogurt. So yeah, I'm just wondering, is psoriasis a symptom of low copper, or is there a connection with it?
Well, it's a symptom of high iron. And so
Oh.
the largest organ inside the body is called the liver. The largest organ outside the body is called the skin. When there's
Mhm.
something that the liver can't clear, it sends it to the skin. Psoriasis, I've had clients put you could use retinol, you could use cod liver oil, and you definitely need the root cause protocol, but you'll clear up the psoriasis. There's probably some pathogenic dimension to it, but the pathogens are living on iron. You got to get rid of the iron. That's really what it comes down to.
Can you say that again? The pathogen creates iron?
The pathogen lives on iron.
Oh, okay.
All,
Mhm.
all pathogens live on iron. And ultimately, you've got to get rid of the excess iron. So, again, blood donation. But topically, you can put cod liver oil on it. Better to probably do that at night, maybe not during the day. People will smell you. But you can also use retinol. And again, we're back to vitamin A and iron. There's a very powerful dynamic between those two. But I think that your start was challenging, and it really changed your microbiome, obviously, but it also changed your mineral chemistry significantly.
Mm-hmm.
But what's amazed me over the last 15 years is learning the endless resilience of the human body. I have never seen such capacity to bounce back as I've seen with clients all over the world. And we were chatting with someone from Bulgaria. I find that people from Eastern Europe to be the fastest to bounce back. There's something in their stock. They have a mineral mass. They come to the States. They get exposed to a goofy diet, and when they stop the goofy diet, and they snap to pretty quickly. Sounds like you might be from down under. Is that right?
No, I'm from Australia,
Yeah.
but I find myself very slow to recover. I've been taking colostrum for the inner intestines, and unfortunately, that hasn't really worked.
Well, the soils of Australia are known to be very low in copper. And so
Mm,
I don't know what the conditions were of your mom's pregnancy when she was carrying you. I have a feeling there was some stress involved.
yeah, a lot of stress.
And so you were not given minerals, you were bathed in stress hormones, and so you had a rocky start.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
But you're not,
So,
but you're not broken. You're just out of balance.
right, should I go and buy a copper pot and like cook something in it every day?
Um, the civilizations that have used copper pots did not have sanitized water, and the copper vessels were used to kill the microbes. I'm not convinced that there is sufficient copper parts per million being added to the water to offset the decimation of copper by the farm food and pharmaceutical systems. It can't hurt you. It's not going to solve your problem. You need bigger doses. To use a copper vessel is like using a straw to put out a fire. What you need is a fire hose. You need a
Okay.
much more, you need a more substantive source of bioavailable copper.
We have standard process. We have the equivalent of standard process in Australia because the founder is Australian. So, yeah, should I also be looking at the spleen? Because I was told that my adrenals are all burnt because of stress and all that. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I think you should look into the spleen. You're talking about MediHerb? I know they have a
Mediherb,
alliance.
yeah.
No, it's MediHerb. Don't pronounce the H. You don't.
Yeah.
All the people that support my program are from Australia, so I'm always teasing them. They say very funny things, like aluminium and what's another one? There's some very funny words. But yeah, MediHerb would be great, but standard process would be a real good resource for you to build up your spleen. I guarantee it that if you have adrenal issues, you have a spleen that's compromised.
Absolutely. So, what would be my first sort of line, besides sugar shift and SIBO? What would be the first thing that I need to address? Because I think I've got parasites. I've got a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, I would have you go to the root cause protocol and just do the stops and the starts. And it's a very we've been at this now 7 or 8 years, and thousands of people around the world. It's a great place to start, and Martha can put you in touch with practitioners down under, and you can begin to work with them. There's some very, very talented people who understand this program very intimately, and I think it's the biggest challenge is the first step. First step is just to get access to that protocol, and then begin to incorporate the game plan, the stops and the starts.
Okay. So the protocol that you're talking about, the RCP 123 at .org.
RCP123.org,
.org.
not at org, but .org. Yeah.
.org. Yeah. Okay. So you're saying have a look at that program.
Mhm. But it's a great place to start. There's a good chance you have parasites, but a good axiom to understand is that any animal that has parasites is copper deficient. Any animal that's copper deficient will have parasites. Not my theory. It's the theory of Pat Coleby, Coleby. She was a world-renowned animal farmer from Australia.
How ironical. Yeah.
But she was
Or
amazing figure. She wrote many, many books, but I think the best book by far is The Natural Goat Care. It actually should be called Natural Human Care. Some very practical tips in it.
Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Morley. I appreciate it. So I'll look into that copper.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, with that, we have run over once again. With lots of great questions, great presentation, Morley. I think you've opened people's eyes to some new things, and always appreciate that, and appreciate all the work you're doing to teach people about minerals and bring this information forward.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. And if any of you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate. You can drop me an email, morleyrobbins@gmail.com. And for the brazen few that want to talk to me by phone, it's 847-922-8061. The best part of my day is getting phone calls from people who don't think I'm going to answer the phone. And they go hypoxic. Oh my God, I didn't think you were going to answer the phone. And I do all the time. So
He will answer the phone.
I will. Thank you all for the opportunity. I wish you well. And you're in great hands with Martha. And she knows how to get a hold of me. God knows she knows how to get a hold of me. But thank you again, Martha, for the chance to have this conversation.
Thanks for coming. And actually, so we still have, some more calls in the series, but Morley is our last presenter. So the next few calls will just be me answering questions for the group, and we will take it from there. So thanks for joining us tonight. And with that, I'll stop our recording.
Okay.
Good night.